Traditional burial and conventional cremation are without a doubt the favoured body disposal methods in Australia. Many people don't even know there are other options available. We do, by the way. We did a whole video on it and I'll put that in the description. But did you know these are not the only options that are considered normal around the world? Every community has its own preferred method based on its beliefs, history and resources. So in this video, we're looking at the body disposal methods still used around the world that Aussies may find unsettling. Please like and consider subscribing if you find this video interesting. Now let's talk unusual body disposal methods. Funeral pyre. Also known as open cremation, this is done in many parts of the world. Now you might say, we have cremation, so what's the big fuss here? Well, how many Aussies do you know that would hang around to watch their mum being burnt to ashes on the top of a pile of sticks for hours on end? Or would be okay with that happening out in the open anywhere near them? I can hear the screaming now, the children, the children! Funeral pyres are the norm in many parts of the world, India being the most well known along the River Ganges, but also throughout parts of Africa and Asia. In the past, they were extremely common throughout Europe and the Americas as well. However, with each pyre taking around 6 hours to burn and needing constant attention to maintain that high heat level, it has led to deforestation problems, so it's very unlikely to be coming to Australia. Digging up the dead. In many cultures, death is not seen as an ending, and keeping on good terms with your ancestors is very important. Which brings us to two different festivals: the turning of the dead in Madagascar and the ceremony of cleaning of corpses in Indonesia. Starting closer to home in Indonesia, the Torajan's are an ethnic group indigenous to the mountainous regions of South Sulawesi, Indonesia. Their population is around 1,100,000, of whom 450,000 live in the regency of Tanah Toraja, and this is where this ritual occurs. In Toraja society, funeral ritual is the most elaborate and expensive event, and it can take years to save up for it. During this time, the deceased is treated like the living, staying in the family house and being offered meals. Once money is saved up, the funeral takes place. But that is not the last time they see their deceased relative. Every year they celebrate the cleaning of the corpses, where families visit the tomb of the deceased relatives, dig up their remains before cleaning the corpses, dressing them in fresh clothes and parading them around the village. The coffin is cleaned or replaced if needed, and then the deceased are tucked back into their coffins and placed back into the cave that they were interred into. If you're wondering how they manage all of this without the bodies falling apart, they have usually naturally mummified before the funeral occurred. Keep this in mind as we head to Madagascar. The Turning of the Bones festival occurs every 5 to 7 years, where people honour their ancestors by exhuming them from the family tomb, wrapping them in fresh shrouds, and hanging out. It is very much a joyful celebration with music, hog roast, rum and dancing. However, in saying that, there is also an overwhelming emotion of sadness when exhuming these bodies, an intense renewal of the loss. Rather than treat bereavement like a flesh wound that heals over time, this ceremony rips it open all over again, if only for a moment. This feeling is acknowledged before the celebration begins, and I'll link in the description an article written about one of these experiences. Exposure. In many ways, exposure to the elements is the most basic of basic body disposal methods. So first up, we're off to Tibet. Tibetan and Mongolian Buddhists have no desire to preserve or commemorate a dead body, something that is seen as an empty vessel. Moreover, in tune with their respect for all life, Buddhists see it as only fitting that one's final act is to have their remains used to sustain the life of another living creature. And this is where sky burial comes into the picture, which is really not the most helpful of names. This tradition involves a non-Buddhist chopping up the body into small pieces and leaving the remains on a high outcrop for vultures and other animals to eat. Sometimes bodies are left whole, but the idea is for the body to be eaten as quickly as possible. Onto another religion who uses nature's cleanup crew. The Zoroastrians in India use towers of silence in which to lay their bodies out for vultures to come and eat as well. This is because they see the dead body as unclean, and therefore they believe it defiles anything it comes into contact with: ground, clothes, people, even fire. The entire ritual is done in a way to ensure the minimal amount of harm and injury to the living. And we've done an in-depth video on Zoroastrian funeral practice if you'd like to know more. Many indigenous communities around the world used exposure to dispose of their bodies. Here in Australia, particularly in the Northern Territory, it was common for a body to be placed atop a raised platform and covered in leaves and branches where it was left to decompose for many months. In some cases, the liquid from the decaying corpse was collected and rubbed over the bodies of young men to pass on the good qualities of the deceased person. After the bones were retrieved and painted with red ochre, the bones were then either placed in a cave or inside a long hollowed out log. And in some cases they would be worn by relatives for up to a year. While this is certainly not common anymore, it is thought to occasionally still happen in some parts of remote communities up north. Endocannibalism. For some cultures, the best way to honour the dead is by eating them. These feasts of the dead are a way to forge a permanent connection between the living and the recently deceased. It's also a cathartic way to express the loathing and fear associated with death and its tragic aftermath. In the past, this was very common. In recent times, it was strongly practiced by the Melanesians of Papua New Guinea and the Warai people of Brazil. While these countries have made it illegal to eat the dead, it is believed that endocannibalism still goes on in these parts of the world, though to a lesser extent. For more about this, check out our cannibalism video. Interment in trees. In the Caviteno tradition in the Philippines, when an individual is ill due to old age or illness and is near death, they choose a tree which is then hollowed out. After they die, they are vertically entombed within the tree. They believe that trees give life, and this is their way of giving back. It's probably good to mention here, but these trees are huge, and hollowing out a human-sized hole doesn't kill the tree. Heading back to Tanah Toja in Indonesia again, who have a similar practice for their young of the community, usually infants, but also those up to teething age. If an infant dies, it will be wrapped in cloth, a hole hollowed out from a large tree, and the body placed inside. The hole is then sealed over with palm fibre, and as the tree heals over time, the body is believed to be absorbed. The community believes that infants should be together, and thus dozens of babies can be interred in a tree over many years. Now, of course, these are just unusual body disposal methods that are still in use today. The past is full of interesting ways to dispose of a body. It's just that many of them have fallen out of favour. The idea of showing you these traditions is so that you have an understanding that the way we deal with death is not the only way, nor the normal way. Which means that the way we think about death can be shifted to a more positive light again. With that, please like, subscribe and share this video. Now, go talk death.